an emergency debate, not just on this particular HICWA report, but on a series of HICWA reports which I have raised here with you, and also with a letter from HICWA which made it clear that most of its recommendations had not been acted on, and that therefore patient safety was at risk. So I will return to that issue, if I may, Taoiseach and Lasconcolia, later. I want to deal now with the refusal of the Irish banks to cut variable mortgage rates for struggling householders and to pass on the mortgage rates that the central bank has reduced. Now, on the 30th of April, Taoiseach, you said this was unacceptable, and you have been voicing similar sentiment for some years now. But yesterday, in a report to the Department of Finance, the central bank said that it does not want powers to compel Irish banks to reduce variable mortgage interest rates. And I'm sure that the 300,000 mortgage holders will have received this news with utter dismay, Taoiseach. They know, and you know, and we should be very, very clear about what's going on. The European Central Bank reduced its variable interest rates, but the Irish banks have refused to pass this reduction on to households. Instead, they are pocketing the money. And quite simply, Irish mortgage holders are being ripped off by the banks. And meanwhile, the central bank, if we listen to what it said to the Minister of Finance, is refusing to protect these self-same householders. Now, Sinn Féin have been calling on you, Taoiseach, for the last 4 years to take action on this issue. You need to state now, take the opportunity now to point out very clearly and robustly that you reject the central bank recommendations. You need to make it very, very clear now that you're going to ensure that the central bank takes on these new powers. So, Taoiseach, will you assert clearly that you will ensure that mortgage holders who have been denied the benefit of the European Central Bank reductions will finally be awarded and afforded some relief?
Well, first of all, I made it perfectly clear over quite some time that the government are unhappy and find it unacceptable that lending banks here have not passed on the reduction in rates that they themselves borrow at to variable mortgage holders. The Minister for Finance has made it clear on many occasions that were the central bank to request him for legislative authority to deal with interest rates, that he would so legislate. Deputy Adams is aware that neither the central bank nor the government dictate what variable interest rates are. In respect of that, the Minister is returning from Brussels today from a Eurogroup meeting in respect of matters relevant to the euro and so on. Now, I understand that report that you refer to, and you seem to be quoting from the report. I haven't received this report. It has been received in the Department of Finance, and I expect that the Minister will have the opportunity to look at the report and go through it this evening. And obviously he's made his intention very clear of engaging with the banks following receipt of the report in regard to variable mortgage interest rates, which everybody here knows and understands that people have struggled and are struggling in a very unfair position where banks have not passed on rates reduced to themselves to mortgage holders. So I'd suggest, Deputy Adams, that it be only appropriate for the Minister for Finance to be able to assess and read and analyse the report which he asked the central bank to provide to him, and that we have the opportunity to discuss the report here in due course, and for the Minister to make recommendations to government as to what the appropriate and best thing to do here is, taking into account that government have made it clear that we do not find it either fair or acceptable that this situation continues to exist.
Come on, it's Deputy Gerry Adams.
I haven't read the report, Taoiseach. I'm surprised that you haven't. And where I got this information is where most of us on these benches, and I'm sure the back benches as well, get their information. It's through the media. So I'm surprised and disappointed that you haven't had the time to read what is being recommended by the central bank. And you say you're unhappy, and that's been a consistent theme. You say this is unacceptable, you say this isn't fair. But Taoiseach, you're not a commentator, you're not a spectator. Hand-wringing by you, or indeed the Minister for Finance, hasn't worked. Polite conversations haven't worked. As Michael Noonan might put it, some of these bank CEOs are allergic to fairness. So you need to take firm and decisive action. You know what the problem is. The state also owns most of these banks. So what is required is necessary insolvency legislation to support struggling homeowners. What is required is legal protection for the family home. And citizens have been waiting, and they have been waiting, and they have been waiting for the government to introduce proposals to deal with this crisis. The stress and the anxiety that's been visited upon these families is very, very real. Now, compare this with your willingness to have all-night sittings, with your willingness to take in and to develop, under a Labour minister, unprecedented new legislation which allows the government to go into people's pensions and into people's welfare benefits and into people's salaries to pickpocket to pay for your water taxes. So couldn't differ. On the one hand, there's no problem, the government bringing in all of these measures when it's ordinary folks, but when it comes to the banks, you waffle and you engage in rhetoric and you don't act.
Question, please, Deputy.
Well, the question is quite simple, Last Concordia. You're here to protect the taxpayers. You're here to protect these householders. You're here to stand up for them and to stand up to the banks. So will you introduce specific measures to end the bank veto and to reduce variable interest rates and to ensure that the interest rates that are coming from the European Central Bank are not pocketed by our banks here, but are passed on to the people who own that?
Thank you, Deputy Adams. First of all, the report was commissioned by the Minister for Finance to be provided to him by the Central Bank. That report was received yesterday evening in the Department of Finance, as I understand it. The Minister for Finance was in Brussels and is returning from Brussels today. He will be the first person to see and read the report, as was his request. So it's not delivered to everybody else, if that's your insinuation. So the Minister is entitled to receive the report, to see it, to read it, to assess what's in that report and bring his recommendations to government. You mentioned that I'm unhappy and have been unhappy for quite some time about this matter. We're also unhappy about the issue of promissory notes. I was unhappy about $3 billion being borrowed every year to pay interest for Anglo-Irish. I was unhappy about the extent of our deficit. I was unhappy about the unemployment rate. I was unhappy about the situation that applied in respect of mortgage distress. And yes, we are here to protect the taxpayer. And the central mandate given to this government was to fix our public finances and put our country back to work. And I'm happy to report to you that we will exceed the target we set ourselves of having 100,000 new jobs created by the end of 2016. I'll come to the question that you asked. I was unhappy about the unemployment rate at 15.2%. I'm still unhappy, but it's moved to 10% and is heading in the right direction. And clearly, the situation and the shape of our public finances is now in a much better position than it was when you were crowing over there that Europe could go and stuff itself and whatever other language you wanted to put on it. Now we've had the debate continuously about Irish water. The government listened very carefully to the concerns of people here, and the charge is €1.15 per week for a person living on their own, and €3 per week in the situation where two or more live or dwell in a house. And I'd also make the point to you that it is grossly unfair that in respect of the contribution requested by government here for Irish water and for the use of Irish water, and that some people who can well afford to pay decide not to pay, and that other taxpayers, over 1 million of them, pay their contribution and contribute to the well-being of our society and our country.
Thank you.
We have a number of issues about water and water inadequate facilities around the country that are being identified now by the national body of Irish Water. And it's unfair, Deputy Adams, for you to be able to assume that you can have a sector of Irish society which can well afford to pay the very modest contribution for Irish water, but choose not to do so, and their neighbours pay their way as they have always done, for very many years. So the contribution, as I said, is €1.15 and €3. And yes, Deputy, the government will act as we have acted in respect of the other issues that I was unhappy about.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
But the very first thing that we're entitled to do is have the Minister receive the report, read the report, assess the report and bring his propositions to government for government action. Yes, government will defend the taxpayer and government will act in the interest of the taxpayer, and you'll see the evidence of that hopefully before too long.
Thank you, Taoiseach. I now call Deputy